Hello and welcome back to the DA Dashboard podcast with your district attorney, Steve Kunzweiler, otherwise known as my boss.
Yes.
As we established last time, we want to give a big thank you to our partners at Tulsa County for allowing us to use their studio and, of course, give a plug for the County Line podcast, which our county commissioners are doing a great job with.
Mine says the Government Mule podcast.
And that's the other one, the Government Mule podcast. So we're grateful for all of our partners and glad that podcasts are becoming more and more mainstream.
That's refreshing.
It's a good water. Happy Independence Day. We have just celebrated Independence Day. And Steve, I know you watched Young Washington yesterday. What was the impact of that on you, given our 250th birthday as a country?
Well, it's I don't want to spoil it for anybody else that might be out there thinking about seeing the movie, but it's an interesting perspective on learning about how somebody came to be who they were. Obviously, Young Washington, the story is told 20 years in advance of the Declaration of Independence, when he was a colonist and trying to get into the British Army, and the struggles that he had growing up, and losing his father at an early age, and all those influences upon him. That was fascinating to kind of see. All right, well, what's the backstory to becoming one of the greatest presidents in our history? I came away from that movie with a pretty good sense of admiration that, it takes pretty much an extraordinary person to go above and beyond what would be, something that would frighten most people away. There's all kinds of opportunities throughout that movie where you can just give up, and he could have just given up and, been a decent person, lived a decent life, but he was one of those guys that you run across, or one of those gals that you run across, that are just exceptional. And, you didn't get to see any other main characters other than those early 1750s folks. There's a couple of names you'd recognize, but, to have that many exceptional people come together all at the same time at the founding of our country, I was struck by the idea, well, what was the origin for Washington? And then you get to see that, and then you can appreciate even more why he was so driven to pursue what he was doing. So that was kind of my takeaway, was just that idea of being exceptional and what it took.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, 250 years. We're relatively a young country, but much ado has been made about this 250th birthday, rightfully so. What are your takeaways as you reflect on 250 years of our country? What stands out to you as the things that you relish as being an American?
Bottled water, I think, maybe the big one.
It's a plus.
That's, you've heard me give this talk a time or two. I hearken back to the War of 1812 and do a talk about what I call the noble profession and what that meant. It's one thing to declare your independence, and I think that word is so misunderstood. It's really an extension of the word dependence, that there was this level of dependency that apparently we had, thinking that we were reliant on somebody else to call the shots. So to actually make a declaration of, no, we no longer want to be dependent upon you, we want to be independent, we want to call our own shots. It's pretty extraordinary, but, you move forward to 1812, and I talk about how at that point when Britain was moving to return and reclaim the United States of America, by then we're an infant country, but many of the people who fought in that war really weren't even alive during the war for our independence. I mean, that battle started in the 1770s, 1776, when we made our declaration, and a multiple year war. Then you move forward. I mean, it's 30 plus years the average life expectancy of a lot of people back then was about 30 years. So these are sons and daughters who weren't even there when that war was fought. Very different than what we have today, right? I mean, I've been around I'm 64 years, so I can think back to Vietnam and the Gulf War and the things that are happening today, and so I can reflect back on those things. But to those young people in the country, they were facing, once again, the greatest military that was on the face of the planet, and the heroism that went into defending it. And I always talk about the battle for Fort McHenry, which is just outside the military point entrance for Baltimore, and how George Armstead, who was I think a major in the United States Army, was tasked with defending Fort McHenry to keep the British from coming in and invading Baltimore. And what heroism that took, and that was where we got our national anthem with, Francis Scott Key sitting out on a boat. He's on envisioning some kind of prisoner exchange, and realizes the enormity of this invasion force, and how for 25 or 26 hours that fort had been bombarded by about, I don't know, I think they said something like 3,000 rockets, mortars, bombs. To stay within that, keep that flag up, and to inspire a nation to resist and prevent the invasion of Baltimore, but ultimately to recognize the courage and heroism that took. So I think about that point in time, how critical that really was. It's one thing to declare independence. It's another thing to actually defend it with a whole new generation. And so that, for me, you think about all the trials and tribulations that this country has gone through, and a lot of countries go through them, but I'm not quite sure to the level that we've had to, because we were standing for something very unique, which was freedom. Most countries, all countries up to that point, didn't have this idea that everybody should be free. And I recognize that we had slavery at the time, but even at that time there were talks of making sure that the slaves would be counted as free men. And we had to go through a civil war for that. So all those trials and tribulations, and to be able to celebrate freedom for 250 years is pretty extraordinary.
Mm-hmm. Is that why Lincoln is your favorite president?
Well, I'd like to say Lincoln is my favorite president. I felt like you were going to ask me this question. Of course, it's Millard Fillmore. Actually not. I just looked up who was the 13th president, because 13 is my favorite number. And so Millard Fillmore is the 13th president. But actually, I'm from Missouri, and so I've always liked Harry Truman.
Okay.
I thought, of course, he's the longest serving, well, other than Franklin Roosevelt, he was the second longest serving president. But one of my favorite lines that Harry Truman had was, people had told him that, give him hell, Harry. That was one of the things that he was known for. And somebody had asked him about that and what he felt about that. And his response was, well, people always tell me give him hell. He says, I don't give anybody hell. I just tell them the truth, and they think it's hell. Mm. And I love that quote, because I think in a lot of respects, people who don't have the best interests of their country at heart, and there's always maybe some selfish interest, when you confront them with the truth, which is what the job of a DA is anyway, is to, like our motto, find truth, seek justice. It's very difficult for people that are used to using power and influence and money to face up to somebody that won't play that game. And so when you tell folks, all right, well, that's great, I appreciate your perspective, but here's the truth, and I'm going to stick in this lane, that's very unsettling to people that are used to getting things done a different way. So I've always respected President Truman for that attitude of standing up to it. And if you think about it, we have other presidents like that. I think our current president is very much like that. I mean, he's calling out what are truths that a lot of folks that he says are in the swamp would rather not be discussed in open conversations. But he has no problem doing that, because he knows, everybody ought to know what's going on behind closed doors. Mm-hmm.
We were in our jury trial room earlier today, you and I, and in that room is a quote from Thomas Jefferson, talking about how a jury trial is one of the greatest manifestations of democracy. What are you wanting to see from the office in this year in particular to make good on statements like that from our founding fathers, that what we are doing here is a way of life that should be protected and preserved for the future?
It's interesting because I just went through this reelection campaign and obviously grateful to the Tulsa County citizens for allowing me to be their DA for the next 4 years. But it's not necessarily what I would call a political job. I do like the idea that you ought to run as being a member of a particular party. I think it shows something about what your values are or where your positions stand. But at the end of the day, a lot of the decisions that we make as prosecutors, you're not looking at age or color or creed or sex or religion. You're not looking at any of that stuff. You're just looking at, all right, here's the law. And how does the law apply to this fact or these facts? And obviously, sometimes you could have some disputes that would be subject to interpretation. That's why you have judges. But moving forward, obviously, the focus has always got to be on finding truth. What is the truth? And if you can get to that point, sometimes oftentimes in our job, it's going to lead to pointing a finger at somebody who committed a crime. But sometimes you find out, maybe we don't have this exactly right. Well, if you found the truth and it's going to exonerate somebody, then you move towards that end of justice. So first and foremost, that's what I'm going to be focusing on, is making sure my people understand those concepts, because I think prosecutors are somewhat the last line of defense in defending this republic that we have. There's a lot of folks that want to do things differently. They want to think that the old ways are not as good as the bright, shiny new ideas like socialism, as hard as that may be to think. I mean, we literally have people out there thinking that that's a good idea. I think it's up to lawyers in general, but prosecutors in particular, that as long as we're standing with the law and try to advance that for the benefit of everybody, then most people will say, okay, that's why I live in this country. I want to live in a country where everybody's going to be treated fairly, equally, and with some level of integrity. If you don't have that, then you're just going to turn into every other banana republic that's out there, where power and influence and money are going to dominate. And we're seeing some effort to try and do that today. So I think prosecutors have a very important position in holding that line.
Mm-hmm. You're a big soccer guy.
Mm-hmm.
You coached your girls' soccer teams. We're hosting FIFA World Cup, and a part of hosting that for our country has been this result of the FIFA World Cup becoming this catalyst for American exceptionalism.
Mm-hmm.
People are pouring in all over the world and having great experiences in America. What are your thoughts about that? What are your thoughts about soccer becoming more mainstream in America? It's probably something that you've been wanting to see for a long time.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up a baseball fan, but also played a lot of soccer. I grew up outside St. Louis, so up there, the sports were baseball, soccer, and basketball. And it came down to Oklahoma, and soccer really wasn't much of anything back in the late 80s. I mean, you did have semi-professional ball here, but not to the level it is that's in schools that it is today. I mean, with regard to the World Cup, obviously the greatest disappointment I have is that Germany got knocked out. I was very disappointed by that. But
would you rather play them?
Well, I mean, with a name like Kunzweiler, you're going to have some allegiance.
Do you have dual citizenship? I don't know.
No,
about?
I don't have that. But yeah, I was a little disappointed in that. But my current fun team to follow is Norway. That Holland guy, or whatever his name is,
the 6'5" guy.
Incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, just amazing to watch a guy, and he seems to be kind of a decent gentleman out there on the soccer field. I like Argentina. I've always liked since I was coaching Jenny, my middle daughter, in soccer, she introduced me to Lionel Messi from Argentina. So it's kind of fun to watch that. I'm obviously rooting for USA. I want them to win it all. But, you always hedge your bets a little bit. And my big bet was Germany, and we went down in flames. So now I'm kind of, I like looking at underdogs. So I like Norway right now as the underdog team. It'd be fun to watch them win. I mean, we've had some big teams drop out. I mean,
We're underdog.
I agree. Yeah, no, but not in your home country. We ought to take it home, right? And without bringing home the World Cup, it's a great disappointment. But if
So
if
you
they
think
go,
it's win the World Cup or bust for the U.S.?
it has to be. I mean,
Wow.
we're on our own turf, Adam. I mean, if we should
Okay.
win this thing. I mean, that's when I coached my daughters in soccer. They didn't like it, but I always played up, meaning. When they were in second grade, I always put us in the third grade league. I mean, you could do that back in the day, and so I had bunch of these little second graders, and they'd look across the field at these taller third graders, and they'd be just like, "Oh my gosh,
What are you
there's
doing
third
to us?"
graders," and I was like, "We're going to beat them. Stop looking over there. Let's come up with a game plan." And because the only way you learn to play any sport better is you have to play better talent. And I knew that we could play head to head with second graders or third graders in the right age group, but you wouldn't really be learning. And so I always pushed my girls to play talent that was better. And then when they would win, I would tell them, I was like, just think about how embarrassing that's going to be for all those other third graders to go back to school to know that they lost to a bunch of little second grade kids. So, I think to your question about exceptionalism, I that's one of the things that in that movie about George Washington, there's a little line in there about even a pawn can knock off a king on the chessboard, right? There is something that's within all of us that when you live in a country like ours, I do believe just about anything is possible. Now, I mean, if you're 5 foot tall, you're not going to win the high jump, okay? But you do have the ability to, for the most part, accomplish just about any attainable dream if it's within your physical abilities or within your intellectual abilities or within your physical capabilities, whatever that is. But you have to push yourself. And if anything, I've learned watching these World Cup games and what it says about our country, you're seeing people from around the world coming to the United States who've been indoctrinated in these awful negative impressions of our country. I mean, they've come from supposedly countries that believe in democracy, and yet they've heard stories about how we're backwoods or we're a violent country or we are arrogant. And then they show up and then they realize that we're this great melting pot of people who all we want is to get to live in a better environment than what we were. Some of these folks are like, I'm watching two women walking down the street and they're not afraid to walk down the street. Why is that? Because I've been told in America you can't walk safely down the street. Or I've been told that everybody in this country eats horribly, and yet they're sitting there eating some of the food that we're eating and then getting enjoyment out of eating barbecue or ranch dressing.
Yeah.
And it makes me think, well, what the world are you eating over there? They've been fed lies by governments and people that have nothing, no desire to try to compete with us. They'll take our money. They'll obviously take our money. And they love taking our money, but on a competition scale, they know they can't compete with us. So the only thing they can do is indoctrinate their public that's a really bad place. Stay away from the United States of America. They got crazy folks. And then now you got all these tourists coming here from all over the world, and they're realizing, kind of like the Wizard of Oz, once the curtain gets pulled away, they start realizing it's not what they've been told. And I'm reasonably confident now there's going to be this explosion across the world from those people who are returning to their countries to say, well, why can't we be like the United States? They seem to be doing it. Why are we being held back? I think it's been a great opportunity to export American exceptionalism. So I think soccer is a great sport to convey that message.
Well, I think one thing's clear: you're not competitive at all.
No,
that's
no,
that's abundantly clear.
I roll over and give up every time.
Huge pushover.
Yes,
Yeah.
I am.
Well, thank you for spending this time with us. Thanks to all of you for watching the DA Dashboard podcast. This is a monthly publication that we will be doing. If you haven't subscribed to the DA Dashboard, please go to our website and hit the subscribe button. We want to thank you for spending this time with us. Make sure to find truth, seek justice, and we'll see you next time.